Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to a brand new episode on the Honda Fireblade project. And yes, we have finally got the bits we need to get to the next stage. So what I'm going to be looking at doing in this episode is we've got the swinging arm bushing kit, so we can fit that into the swing arm. We can get the swing arm on, hopefully all the shock and the rear linkage that we've done. We can get the rear wheel on and all of that sort of stuff. I am still waiting for a piece of tooling to help me lift the engine in. So if that turns up, we can get that in, get the engine mounted and make a real dent in the next step of this project that we've got to do. Right, okay, hopefully you can see what I'm going to be up to. But what my plan is now is to start building up the rear linkage. So we've got some needle roller bearings. They come in a kit. So I've just checked these sleeves here that just go through the centre of these. There is a little bit of staining on some of them, but as far as actual damage where the bearing seats, they're all okay. So that's not a problem. So we've got that one that sits in there, I'm assuming. That one in there, and then this one in the top here. This bearing here is the largest of all of them. So I'm guessing that that one goes in there because that is the largest hole out of all of them. So you've got that bearing there with those two larger seals. And I believe these two shims or spacers go in either side, like so. I need to work out where this one goes, whether it's just a case of it brings it to one side. I'm not entirely sure just yet. So I've checked all of these. These are all of the same bearing part number and all of these seals are the same. So in order for me to fit these, what I'm going to look at doing is using the bearing sleeve or whatever we want to call it. I can't remember what I just called it a moment ago. But basically this shaft piece, and then what we will do is I'll grease them all up later. They do come with some grease in there, but I will grease them all up later. So I'm going to use that like so. And the idea behind that is that that's going to support the bearing from any of the needles falling out. Because I don't want to be pressing on the side of this here and then risk potentially the needles falling out into here. So we can either go that way or we can go that way, but I think from preference I'm probably going to go this way. So now that I've got that down, wound down and sort of tight into place, just wanted to have a look at the thickness of the seal. And what I think I might try and do, just going to put myself a bit of tape round the socket so I've got a rough stopping point. I'm going to need to go in a little bit more, and what I am also going to need to do is use a larger socket. So I'm going to need to use a slightly smaller one here, so that fits in there nicely, and then a larger one over here because this section here is starting to push on this central sleeve. That's the seal now pushed into place. I've just used the socket and just pushed it in by hand. So I've got that in there now, and then I've just slid the insert as far out as I can, but not quite out of the needle rollers there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pack that full of grease, then push that through. So we just clean that side out now, then we'll repeat the process on the other side. What I will do is push this sleeve slightly through like so, just like that, and then grease this. Oh, actually no, I won't be able to do that. I'll shut up. What we'll do with this side is we'll grease it before we put it in. So there you go, that is now in place on both sides. So we've got the seals in, we've got the sleeve in the centre, and we've got the needle roller bearings in there. Now that I've done that one, what I'm going to look at doing is just the same process on this one. The only difference is going to be that this particular larger bearing doesn't have a shim that goes in the middle, so I'm just going to have to be very, very careful with that. I mean, potentially what I could look at doing is putting these two pieces in there, like so, but they don't hold the centre of the bearing. I believe the shock bolt does that, because that's where the shock sits on, if I'm correct. So yeah, we'll get all of the rest of this sorted, and then that linkage will all be complete and ready to go onto the bike. Here we have one of the front foot pegs and a guard here, so I'm just going to disassemble this because I want to clean it, chuck it in the ultrasonic cleaner, and I also want to paint it to match the rear, because the rear ones have turned out so well. I thought it would be nice to do the front and match them. So we just got 2 Allen key bolts. I might well put them back on before I paint the stuff, and paint them the same colour as well, just because they are a little bit rusty. That can go in. Then on this, we've just got a little C-clip there. Get ourselves a pick for that. So as well, C-clip, E-clip, all the same. Sorry if my head's in the way. Bit of persuasion has done the trick. They can now go into the cleaner. And we'll do the same for the other side. That one has got all of the brake system on it. So as you can see here, that's got all of the rear brakes. So I'm going to put that in the cleaner, this and this as well. So we are going to have to take all of this lot off. So with the side cutters, I'm not actually putting any pressure on the pin clamping wise. I'm just using the jaws to lever up on this outer part here, or the top part, just so I can wiggle it out. Oh, there we go. Out into the cleaner. Just check there's nothing on that that's going to be affected by going in the cleaner. That's the final piece of the puzzle. When we did the phaser, the FZ6 project, quite a few people mentioned when I went and put the exhaust on, why didn't you clean it? And in all honesty, I completely forgot. That's the only reason I didn't, nor did I have any products available that I thought would be any good for it. So what I've done is I've bought this stuff, Dr. Downpipe. So what we're going to do is give this a go and see if it's any good. So seems to make a claim that it can do pretty well. So it's just a case of, it says spray it directly onto the downpipes, leave it to soak for up to 1 minute, clean using a pad, which it comes with to agitate any dirt and grime. If heavily soiled, repeat it. And then it just says finally rinse it right off. So I'm going to do exactly that with this. Fingers crossed it's going to come up looking really smart afterwards. This stuff is really quite good. That's just after one go. I know we were spraying it a few times when we were doing it, but I think if we have a few more goes at that, we should be able to get it to look really smart. But even at that, looks nice. So I shall now carry on, keep cleaning that, see if I can get that looking really good. I think we can agree that they look a lot better than they did before. So I'm not sure if I've shown this, but I just wanted to give you a closer look of where these engine mounts, these adjustable mounts go in. Basically they go in from the inside out, so we weren't able to fit the engine in. So you've got a threaded section in the frame here. So there's a lower one, which is a longer one, and that was completely missing. And then we've got the upper one, which is a shorter one, and the two tags on the end here, they were broken off, and that goes up in the top here. So you wind those in. So when I go to put those in, I'm going to put some anti-seize paste on there to stop them getting stuck. So you just wind those in, and then what we'll do when we fit the engine in, we will then wind them back out to touch the side of the engine casings, and then you have the nut and bolt that goes right the way through and holds the engine in place. So yeah, it was really good to be able to get hold of those. They're undamaged as well, which is perfect because we want to try and limit, and we don't really want to be fitting any damaged components and chewed up bolts, and you know, it just makes the overall project that bit nicer. So here I've just laid the kit out. This bearing isn't in this kit. I got that separately. The snap ring or circlip, that came with the bike. So that's just to hold this side of the bearings in, so the right hand side. And as you can see, there's 4 seals here. We only need 2. We need one of these 2 for the left hand side, and then we need this one here, the larger one, for the right hand side. So this kit is a universal kit. It fits more than one bike. So what I'm going to use when I'm doing this is I'm going to use this length of threaded bar, and what I'm planning on doing is just pulling one side in at a time, just because I want to have a bit more control rather than trying to pull the pair in. The sleeve tool that I've got, the threads in that are not long enough, so that's why I'm using this and some sockets. So firstly, what I'm going to do is get this socket that I've got here. That's going to go over the end, but I'm going to put some tape, some black electrical tape on here, so that when we are pulling against it, we're not going to damage our nice fresh paintwork. So I'm going to get that set up and see if I can pull one side in. I'm going to pre-oil in here as well, just to make sure that that's nice and lubricated, so it aids the bearing going in. So I'll get things set up on here, and then I'll just talk you through what I'm doing once I'm winding that lot in. So I've just pre-oiled this side. I've put the sleeve inside the needle roller, so I'm going to be pushing on the sleeve, not on the bearing itself. And I've also just put a socket on the end here, and the idea behind that is to hold those needles in place. I don't want to be pushing on the bearing and risk pulling the needles out of the bearing casing. So again, we just put some engine oil onto that there. We've already got the sleeve in the other side. Sorry, we've already got the sleeve in the centre. So I'll carry on winding that in. Once that's in just past here enough to get the seal in and seated down on here, I'll take this lot off and I'll show you, because while I'm trying to do this up and film, I'm in the way of most of it. That is the needle roller bearings now all in place. I didn't get to film that quite as well as I wanted to, because it was a bit awkward, obviously trying to use both spanners and trying to film it at the same time and get a reasonable angle. I was in the way quite a lot of the time. So what we need to do now is fit the circlip in there, so we can pull that out. Bit awkward with one hand, trying not to get the circlip pliers to twist. There we go. So that's that circlip now all in place. What I'm going to do before I put the seals in is I'm just going to pack both sides of it full of grease, the same grease that we've used on the other roller bearings. I'm going to pull that sleeve out, do the same on there, and then we'll just push those rubber seals in by hand, and then that'll be the bearings all completed on the swing arm. We've oiled all of this up, so there's two parts to this. I'm going to put this inner part in first. So that's in just gently. I've got this outer part here, and that's now done. So we've got all of this bolt all greased up now. So I'm just going to lay a rag down, put that on there because I'll need that in a moment. So for the moment, this screw-in shim here shouldn't protrude the frame in this direction, so it shouldn't come in to interfere with the swing arm at this point. So then what we do is that into place like so. And then what we need to do now is, now that that's in place, there's a giant Allen key head in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to torque that up to 15 Newton meters, and then I need to check the next step in the manual, but then I will imagine that potentially this locking tab goes on and then locks that washer in place, or adjusting shim, and then on the other side we've got the washer and the bolt that holds the whole swing arm bolt through the center of the swing arm. So I'm just going to go and double check the manual, have a look through that. But yeah, swing arm's on. Looks short when it's in that position, but I imagine once it's all in place, it's going to look the biz. Okay, so 15 Newton meters on this. So that's okay. Now around to the other side. Now I'm just going to get rid of the excess grease here. I have wiped that side, but I will do the same again, and I'll just clean out as much of it as I can in and around the frame area, because I'm just trying to avoid the build-up of future dirt getting onto that grease. I don't really want it sticking to the beautiful frame. Okay, that is 15 Newton meters on the inside piece. The outside lock-in tab is 64 Newton meters, so we can do that. Okay, so that's locked into place now. Then we come back round here, go back up to 113. And then what I'm going to do now is just check the swing arm moves up and down nicely, no free play whatsoever, just really nice and smooth through the whole transition, right the way from the bottom, right the way up. And then also I'm just pulling on it in that direction just to see if there's any play at all there. And I can't feel anything, all feels nice and solid. So what I will do as well with the headstock bearings, I did the same where I drew a line down it. So I will do the same with this. So I will just draw a line using the pen. And then that way, if at any point it comes loose, I know that that has moved because it doesn't line up anymore. So to do up the lock-in tab on the other side that I'll just show you in a second, I used the same modified Halford socket that I use for the headstock. It's exactly the same size, so just those cutouts that I made on that in an earlier video has paid off because I've been able to use it twice. And there we go, as mentioned, So we torqued this bit up first, which torqued up the inner sleeve there, and then this outer collar we did with that socket. So you've got 15 Newton meters, 64 Newton meters, and then 113 on that nut on the other side. So there's the shock assembly. I'm going to give that a quick clean and a once over, make sure that's all okay. And then we can fit that onto the bike. I'll just check the bolts as well, make sure they're all right. So I've just laid out and mocked up where the linkage system goes, just so I know which bolt goes into which part. As per the manual, I've had a quick reference and looked at that, so I now know which one goes where. I've got my locking nuts here. We've given the bolts and the threads a clean. I'm going to grease those before I fit them in. Then we can get those in place. What I probably will look at doing before I do that is putting the shock in, because the shock, the top bolt is there, and then obviously the bottom bolt is part of the linkage, but I think it's going to be a good idea to get that shock tucked up in there first before we then struggle afterwards with this in the way. So the good thing about this section of work is all of the torque settings for this are 44 Newton meters. So I'm just gingerly going to put this shock absorber in here. I've greased all of these bolts using the same grease that I've used on the swing arm axle tube, or the swing arm pinch pivot bolt, and various other ones throughout the sort of suspension area, should we say. Okay, so I'm going to need to drop this back down and torque up this bottom shock bolt first, and I'll do the top one as well. I'm torquing the nuts, not the bolts, because if you're torquing the bolts, you need probably to change the torque setting, because it's probably going to be slightly higher. What we're going to do is put that in there, then that should hold that spanner in place. I'll mark that one now while I can get to it. I can now lift that up and into place. Like so. Oh, brilliant. That's that linkage system on and the shock on. So, like we've done with all the other bolts, we just mark them all up, clean them all off, Getting the excess grease out the way there. So for now, I just want to steal the caliper carrier off of the caliper, clean it, and then what I'm going to do afterwards is just have a quick look over the brake. I've got a fresh set of pads to go in there as well, so we can do that when we put this back on the bike. But for the minute, I just want to nick that so I can put the rear wheel on. So that's now off of there. I will nick that off there. That can probably stay. Actually, no, that can go. So we give that a quick clean. So there we have our brand new disc. This particular one, it's nice and straightforward. You know which way it goes round because it's got the little recesses for the bolts that mount it. Torque setting for these are 42 Newton meters. So we've now set the rear wheel up on the balancer, and this one doesn't appear to need any balancing at all, which is great, because we've marked our sort of datum here with just a piece of tape. As you can see, if I let go, it doesn't move. If I put it up here, it doesn't move. If I put it there, it's not trying to drag itself round. The wheel isn't spinning at all. So there's the brake caliper carrier. I've cleaned that in the ultrasonic cleaner, got that freshened up. So I'm just going to put that now into the little locator on the swing arm, line that roughly up where I want it with the wheel, or the hole for the wheel. The axle nut, axle tube, I've already pre-oiled that, and now it's just a case of putting the wheel and tyre assembly in. Wow, starting to look more and more like a bike as we go, which is fantastic. I'm not worried about doing any of that up right now because there's plenty more that needs to be sorted before that. We've obviously got to fit the chain, get that all set up for the right tension. So, and we can't do that till the engine's in anyway. So we straighten this thing out a bit, I think. We can take our box out of the way now. We're on the up and up. Oh. I've managed to get this upper chain guard fitted. I've also fitted the crash bobbins on this side and the other side. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, when I was waiting for the rear caliper carrier to be cleaned in the ultrasonic cleaner, I put the chain adjuster bolts on and also the nuts that lock those bolts off. I've put some anti-seize paste on there as well to stop them from getting stuck in place. Now I'm just going to be refitting the foot peg holders that we've painted. I've put all of the foot peg assembly on, so we've got the spring that holds that, or the spring that makes sure that that foot peg stays out in place. I've torqued these two bolts up and I've just nipped these ones up as well. There may well be the torque setting in the manual for it, but I couldn't seem to locate it. Managed to find that. I forget what that was. I can't remember now. I think it's about 50 or 65 Newton meters. So now I've moved on to the side stand, so I've painted that. That is looking really nice. These were also painted as well. They're looking really smart. So we're just going to do up the bolt that goes right the way through. So there's a bolt with a sleeve on it, and that allows the side stand to do so. So what we're going to do is do that one up first. So that one is 10 Newton meters. So we've done that. There is then a nut that goes on the back of that that locks that into place. And although I just looked at it a moment ago, I've already forgotten the torque setting. So I'm going to go and have a quick look. That is 29 Newton meters. So we can do that. So that is that into place. Just mark that. Then we've got the spring. So it goes that way round to avoid hitting, because if it's that way up, this part of the spring, the coiled section, hits the bolt there. So I can get that in. So I'm just going to use a hook on a pick that I've got, and hopefully I'll be able to pull that down and not smack myself with it. Oh, hello. There we go. So I may have got that on wrong, because that is hitting maybe it does go that way around. Doesn't look like it. Must go that way. That's the thing, when you haven't taken these bits apart, obviously there is some trial and error involved. Right, that's it. Yeah, okay. So both the hooks on the spring that are like so face the front of the bike. So as it comes round, it doesn't then hit the nut. So we've got that in. That's done up, that's done up. The bolts for the top part of this switch, side stand are already in place. And then you've got this switch assembly, which looks like it goes on here. So we've got this little section there that hooks onto part of the frame. Then in the back of it, there's just this little tag there that obviously as you pull this round, there is a cutout in here. And that must sit in there like so. So that must sit in there. Then that sits in there. Then you've just got this little locking bolt here. If I can get it to start. And that's just off of 10 Newton meters, that one. Perfect. Great. And then what we'll do for the moment, just hook this wiring round on itself, just to keep it out of the way, because obviously when we put the engine in here, we're not going to want to interfere with any wiring and smash all of that to bits. Let's get the bike shoved back in the hole. Okay, so I'm now going to go and do the foot peg, this one, the other side, and I think that will entail the rear brake assembly as well, so we can put the rear brake assembly on there. We've already got the caliper carrier on, we've already got the new rear disc on, and we can put some new rear pads in there as well, give the caliper a clean, just check the sliders and stuff are free, and just check to make sure the piston looks to be in reasonable condition and goes back okay. That's the caliper assembly and the brake hose, master cylinder, and this piece as well. That is all now clean. I've just wiped it down with some of the dirt blaster that we're using, and I've cleaned all of the hoses off, just check them for any damage. The caliper, this piston looks to be in really good shape. I don't want to go too mad cleaning this with anything too harsh, because I want to keep this nice factory coating on there. I've checked to make sure as well that this slider is moving okay, so I can now push the piston back in. The mounting bolts as well, we're going to give all of them a good clean off. We can re-grease, put some anti-seize on them, put some copper grease on them, make sure that they are all good, and then we're swapping out those pads. This one's starting to get a little bit on the lower side, but because we got a new disc, it's just good practice to put a new set of pads on. So I've cleaned this anti-rattle shim here, and I've also just fed some, I managed to find some caliper slider grease, so I've put that in there. We've just got this little rubber boot that just tucks into this hole. Like so. And then I've pre-greased all of these as well. There we go. And then I've just pre-greased this end of the pad here, because that sits into the slider. So put that in and just let that sit on there. Then the same the other side, and I've taken these anti-rattle shims off of the old pads and just put them onto the new ones. Now we've got those pads in, you just lift them up, put that pinch bolt in or retaining pin, and then finally this one here. So we've got 27 newton meters, 23 and 18. So that's those. So I'm now going to start working my way towards where this slot goes in. It looks as if this master cylinder tucks in up here. I've not got the bolt with this at the moment, so I'm unsure as to which bolt that is. This clamp will go into here, and then this is obviously up the front where the foot pedal is for the brake. So I'm going to see what bolts I can find for that. Get the footrest assembly here ready to go as well. I believe that's going to go something like that. You just take this bolt out while I can get to it. Oh. Go for the same again and just put some slider grease on there because that's a pivot point. Ah, perfect. This bit's in the way. One step forward. Slide that back a bit. There we go. Then slide it forward a bit. We're just putting that circlip back on. And we've just got a nut that goes on the back of this bolt here. There is a split pin that goes through that as well. So once I've torqued that up, I will put a split pin through there. This one just goes in there. I'm not sure what that's for at this point, but it came out of there, so that's where it's going back in for the minute. So next step, torque settings for all of this lot. And get that bit of grease off there. So the first one is the nut here, and that is 18. These two up here, they're 10. Then I need to go and figure out what these ones are because I can't remember. What I'm now going to do is just gently pump this lever down. I'll hook that up there for the minute, I think. Well, actually, I'll hook that, put that in place there for the minute. So as you can see, that now, I'm not going to go mad because none of this is tight, but that is now locking the brake So we know that that's all working okay. I do need to work out where the bolt from this is, or where it's gone, and that needs to go under there, like so. It is new tool time again for the channel. So we have got ourselves a motorcycle lift. So the idea behind this is, as I mentioned earlier, I believe, is we've got ourselves a scissor lift, and I'm now going to be able to use this to put this on the bottom of the engines and help me lift the engines up rather than have it teetering on a trolley jack. We can take the sump off and just have it nice and flat on this. So there we have it, and then we've just got our socket. We've got our socket that goes on the end there, like so, and then this pin here just slides through these. So we've got a nice flat surface there. We just need to take this piece out, take out the oil pickup as well. So we can just wiggle these out. That's that one. That seal should be fine to stay in there. We just gently take that out as well. And that's the water pump shaft. Not entirely sure if you can see that, but I'll see if I can pull it around a bit more. So here is the water pump shaft that comes through the engine, and it just gets its pickup or its drive from the oil pump. So now that this is all clear, we can flip the engine back round. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get everything set up on the side here, get the engine in roughly into place where I want it, and get all of the bolts greased up and everything sorted, ready to go, so that we can get the engine in, get those bolts in, get it back in the frame. That definitely is a really nice way of doing things with a jack like this, although I still need to work on improving getting it to this point, because I have a right old faff around and move about and struggle getting it off the engine stand onto this. So what I did have to do is, if I just move the camera around slightly, I've had to put a couple of blocks of wood under the front wheel and strap the front wheel on there to hold the bike forward from not falling off of the bike lift. I'll get there. So what I can do now is, now that I've got the engine sort of semi where I would like it, I'm going to look at bringing this back down so that this is nice and secure and in the bike lift properly in this front wheel chuck, because I don't want that to fall off of there and scratch it all. And so if we just move that engine forward, so the only thing potentially it could touch is the rubber of the tyre rather than the engine touching the frame there. So those two long top bolts are in. And obviously we're going to need to wind that thread out to bring that bolt right the way through. I need to have a recce and work out what ones go where on this assembly, because there's shims that have got to go in there as well. So let's just get that on there to start, if it will. I'm going to cut back in a second, just when I've got all of these bolts in, and then we can go from there. So after a bit of teetering on the edge of that new jack that we've got and a few curse words, we're in. We haven't dropped it on the floor, which is always a bonus. So what I have done is I've had a route around in one of the bolt boxes, which I believe are the engine bolts. It does tend to, or I tend to find, when people have had these bikes, they've had crash bungs on and off of them and various things like that. The bolts have been changed in and out, and you end up with all these different length bolts. I do appreciate that they are different lengths for a reason on the bike engines, but sometimes you end up with all sorts of stuff. So like this particular bolt that I've got here, that's a 19mm head, whereas all of the others are 17s. This particular bolt here has got 3 washers stacked behind it, and you know, I just want to try and make this bike as good as I can with what I've got. So I've managed to dig out some nicer matching 17mm bolts with washers on them, just the singular washer, and they fit up in these two quite nicely. I will grab the camera and show you some of the other bolts just before we tighten them off and get the engine sort of centralised in place, those shims up against the engine and it all torqued down and ready to go to the next stage. So I'll grab the camera and you can have a quick look. So as I mentioned just a second ago, we've gone for that bolt there and that bolt there. They are matching. We've then managed to work out that 2 of the shims that were in the box of bits, one goes there and one goes here, and you've got that large bolt that goes through, and we're going to wind that sleeve out to touch that. Then we go around the other side. Then on this side we've got one shim in there and another one of those bolts, the same, that matches the other side, and then we've just got one of the existing bolts that was already in place. And then this down the bottom here where the engine is, this is already well in place, and that long sleeve, if you can see, is poking quite a way out of the frame, so that's going to take up nicely to that. So I'm going to wind these in now. So that is the first part. Got another homemade socket here that I've just chopped the top out of. It's not pretty, but it will do what we need it to. Just going to do these up in increments, so I'm just going to so that is about 42. Then we go up slightly, as we said, to 54. That's those two. Just going to mark these castellated nuts. So there you have it, guys. The engine is back in the bike. The beating heart is in there, and I'm really, really pleased. This thing is just looking absolutely fantastic. Obviously, I've had my oily hands over it. I am trying to keep it as clean as possible as I go. But when this thing is finally done and all cleaned up, I've no doubt it is going to look brilliant. I'm going to leave it there for today's video, guys. I really hope that you've enjoyed watching. We've made great progress so far, and I'm really, really pleased with where we've got to. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.